Bristol is a great barometer of the country. The first to chill in the good times and the first to shout out when wrongs need to be righted. It's innovative, it's exciting, but it's also active, and at times it can be angry. So who'd want to oversee the police, often caught in the middle in these times of immense social change, and at times no strangers to controversy themselves? Well, former soldier and Baines County Councillor and Conservative Mark Shelford was elected as Avon and Somerset's second Police and Crime Commissioner 1 month ago. And with his feet just about under the table, let's meet him. Mark, welcome to the programme. First of all, how's the first month gone?
Terrific. I have been drinking from the fire hose of police and fire information, and it's been washing over. But on a serious note, I set a challenge to the office to get me round as many of the wider police family as possible in the first 30 days, and I've been all over the area. And I'm continuing to do so. As soon as I finish with you, I'm jumping in the car and heading off to Wellington and then Highbridge this afternoon. So trying to understand and listen to the police officers, find out what the issues are of how to help convert my manifesto into a police and crime plan. And I've also set the office some significant work along reviewing what we currently do, why we do it, and how we can do it better, particularly from the point of view of scrutinising and holding the police to account. The systems that are in place have been in place for quite a long time, and I think they need a fresh breath of fresh air coming in to look at them. So It's been a busy old month, and I think my staff are looking forward to a weekend off.
Yeah, well, it's interesting getting out and hearing what police officers on the beat are actually saying, because it is confusing times for them. It's a very different force nowadays, I would suggest to you. I mean, a service more than a force, but no longer maybe the long arm of the law. You know, we've now got across the country, we've had episodes of police painting their fingernails and joining in skateboarding and dancing with protesters and so on. Where do you stand on all that? Are you an old-fashioned type of copper supporter in a way, or do you go along with this sort of new wave way of doing things?
So I am a great believer in the principles that were outlined by Sir Robert Peel, who started the police force. And there's some particular things about prevention which are really important. The police need to prevent crime rather than chasing around after criminals. So if we can prevent crime, we don't have to chase them. And so that's one of the most important things. But another aspect is that the police are there by consent of the public, and they need to reflect the public, not only in attitudes and thoughts, but also in their makeup. So we need to recruit more from the communities than we are currently doing. And I've set a task to really look at that and understand how we can do that better.
Okay, I'll come on to the community in just a second, but you've nimbly and professionally swerved the question a little bit. What about this business of identifying with protesters like Extinction Rebellion, painting their fingernails pink or whatever, skateboarding and joining in, all of that stuff? Do you go along with that, or are you going to say that's not for us?
So my view is, and it comes to these Peelian principles again, which is why I went there, it's about without fear or favour. And therefore one must be extremely careful about what one does that suggests that you are not completely objective. And therefore I would take a slightly different view perhaps to my predecessor on that aspect.
So no giving gestures of support like the fist or whatever that we saw recently. What about taking the knee?
Again, I think it's a very unwise thing to do because it suggests bias, and we mustn't be biased. We've got to police without fear or favour, and whilst specifically policing is an operational matter and rests rightly independently and rightly with the Chief Constable, I give the strategic guidance, but I am reflecting what the people of Avon and Somerset have spoken, and what they told me on the doorstep. And so I would have that conversation, but it does remain with the Chief Constable.
You suggest that it suggests bias if you were to, say, take the knee. But of course, we're seeing this in the football conversation that's going on at the moment, isn't it? It is a very divisive thing. But what those who take the knee will say is, hang on a minute, there's nothing biased about this. All we're saying is this is us standing in solidarity against racism, which in the recent events of the last year is something the police would be firmly behind, surely.
I think it's really important to stand against racism. I absolutely agree with that. And we're doing a lot of work with the Lamy report, led by and chaired by Desmond Brown, who has done terrific work about stop and search and the influence and scrutinising how the police powers are used. So I have absolutely no truck with racism at all. And it's all about reflecting respect on each other's communities. I've lived all over the world and I've spoken to people all over the world, and we're all the same. We all want our children to grow up safe and educated and get good jobs. And it doesn't matter which community you're in. They all want the same thing. And we just need to understand that and encompass that difference and celebrate the difference rather than trying to divide us.
The trouble with it is, of course, it's a very divisive society at the moment, isn't it? And I suggested in the introduction that the police are caught very, very much in the middle of this. I mean, Bristol is a protesting city. There's almost a pride in the activism that goes on in this city. Yet last year we saw the police in a way conflicted as to how to deal with that. Will you have very strong views on how you will deal with what is perceived as civil disobedience, or the pulling down of statues, or any of that sort of stuff? Will it be a very strong voice from yours, one way or the other in this?
I absolutely understand your question. I come back to the point about the operational policing sits rightly with the Chief Constable, and I reflect the views of the people of Avon and Somerset, the wider people of Avon and Somerset, including, and importantly, Bristol. And the right to protest has been enshrined in British law for years, and I fully support that. But I don't support the right to disrupt other people going about their lawful business. And so from a strategy perspective, when a protest changes to a public order situation, I think the police rightly need to get in there from a safety perspective and do what they have to do with public order. So, yes, you could say that I am different to my predecessor, but it's about understanding that.
Sorry. In what way, Mark? How do you view the difference in that specific between you and Sir Mount Stevens?
First of all, I'm an ex-soldier, and I've been on the front line of public order issues. And so I understand how jolly frightening it is for those police officers in the front line. And I absolutely respect what they have to do. There's no excuse for rioting. There's a difference between that enshrined public view of being able to protest, absolutely. But when it becomes unsafe and becomes a riot, the police absolutely have to take firm action.
Yeah,
protect safety of everybody else.
I don't think anybody would argue with you on that one. The difficulty comes with perhaps further down the line of, I won't go into the details of pulling down of statues. There's a court case pending on that, so we'll step around that. But when that statue, for example, would come down in this city or in cities around the world, Columbus in America, or whatever it happens to be, looking at Bristol from a policing point of view, is it not a more peaceful city, a better city, with the statue of Colston not being on the plinth than it was before? So it begs the question, do the ends justify the means?
Well, as I said at the time, and I've gone on record at the time, I think if law gives way to a mob, then what's next? So I do take issue slightly with that, and not with the view. If people want to remove the statue, there's a democratic mechanism to do that, absolutely. And that the council can get involved and do that, and perhaps rehouse it. I think it's at a museum at the moment.
But nothing happened. Nothing happened. It went on for years and years. They just get pushed into the long grass. People were asking for this.
I can't comment on the councils and the councillors who were perhaps not getting a grip of the issue. But so the bottom line is, I do not believe ever we should give way to a mob. Ever. Law and order must be upheld. It's terribly important to do that. Otherwise, where do you stand if there's no line? And the law and order is about that line, and the police need to do their task without fear or favour, and that's terribly important to me.
So with the police being deemed to have behaved appropriately in that, if another statue, say, hypothetically, were in the process of being pulled down, you would send the police in to stop that from happening, to prevent that from happening?
I don't deal with hypothetical.
But you do deal with preparations, so in the event of something like that perhaps happening again.
I think preparation is very important. And I think understanding the intelligence piece is very important, making the right engagement, and particularly connecting with those people who are organising protest parades. I think absolutely is where we need to be and perhaps better at. Although I would say, certainly in my initial briefings, having taken over as the PCC rather than as a candidate, it does see that there are extremely good relations between the police and those people who have asked to do protest marches, etc., around the patch. And I encourage that. I think that is a good way forward, because dialogue is terribly important. You know that. That's part of your job. It's really important to understand, talk, and listen to the issues.
You're pretty much a lone voice in the city of Bristol. I think, was it 17% your mandate in the city here, in a very, very Labour, a completely Labour-dominated cabinet and mayor, and of course Metro Mayor. And you're a big advocate, aren't you, of the police crime and sentencing bill, which again all the opposition parties voted against and is terribly divisive. Do you have sympathy for people who say perhaps that elements of that were rushed, not thought through, and are frankly a bit barking when it comes to potential 10-year sentences for somebody damaging a statue, when in fact you maybe would get 5 years for actual bodily harm? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense in places.
Well, I think that the point that you make about connecting to the people of Bristol is very, very important. And I'm as I go out on my community engagement piece, I will engage with Bristol as much as I will anywhere else, and will talk to all local politicians. And you said it's a dominated Labour city. You perhaps forget that there are also Greens and...
No, I said the cabinet and those who rule the city. Yes, absolutely.
So there are lots of different opinions within the city, and it's important to connect to all of those different opinions. But specifically on the police and crime bill, to return to where you were going on that, I do believe that it's the right thing. I think it's going under review at the moment in Parliament and addressing some of the issues. I think some of the issues about sound and all of that sort of thing, I think probably do need a review. But luckily it's not my job to do that. And we have MPs to look at that and make sure we get the right.
So you agree that the annoying noise or noise levels, which can be very subjective, are perhaps something again that hasn't been thought through on this?
Well, I think one of the things that I have asked when I've been out talking to MPs as a candidate was to say that any bill that is put through that has the police having to enforce it, to think about the practicalities of how the police forces will enforce those issues, whatever they may be, to remove as much as possible the judgment required on the front line. Because depending on the situation that you're in, the hot and frightened and concerned, whatever, you can make bad calls. And so if it's much easier to see those things and reduce the amount of judgment that's required by the frontline police officers, then I think that's a good thing. And then that leads to a good bill, because it can then be rightly enforced in the right way.
A couple of quick questions. I know that you need to get out and meet those people you talked about a little bit earlier on, but let's bring up diversity, which is a massive situation for you as well. Institutionally racist, I think, was you were deemed after the Ebrahimi affair, and at the moment still a frighteningly low percentage of people from the BAME community within the police force and the staff of the police. That's something that's got to be radically fixed, isn't it? And done quickly.
It has. And I've got on top of it straight away with my team, and we're addressing it. And I go back to the days when I was responsible for a bit of recruiting in my regiment, which was an Irish regiment and a Yorkshire regiment smashed together after the First Gulf War, and I was wandering around Yorkshire, and it's not my home county, and I realised very quickly that what we needed to do was to convince the mothers that in this case, in the police force, we need to convince the mothers that being a member of the wider police family gives a really good career prospect, fabulously diverse. Across, you could be a diver through to somebody working in intelligence, and it gives you very good qualifications that then allow you, after the end of your career, to go into other work. And that's where and I think that sort of technique, looking into those communities, talking, sitting down and addressing their issues that they have, they're trying to convince the mothers that their children have a good career ahead of them, is something that we need to encourage.
Great to be a diver and all those various things you can do in the police force, but you've got to overcome the lack of trust in the police, and that's a universal thing basically across the globe, isn't it? George Floyd onwards. But there is a mistrust, and there's also a very low morale within the police force, within Avon and Somerset police, I would suggest as well. What are you doing from pretty much, or have you been doing from day one, just briefly, Mark, to address that problem? How are you stirring the troops here? Are you bringing in your military background into that, or what are you doing about it?
Well, I would take issue that there's very low morale. I would say that I've made, as part of my manifesto, a pledge to improve morale. Absolutely. And I am looking at the way their kit, their training, particularly their training, about their administration, trying to reduce the amount of time they have to spend in front of a computer so they can get out and be on the front line and talking to people and understanding and having influence. And yes, of course, unashamedly, I'm an ex-soldier. Of course I am. And I do go out and I want to talk to the people, because that's what we always did. You want to talk to police officers, frontline police officers, and the rest of the police family, and find out what the issues are, so we can improve the way they do their business, because they're the best people to ask that question of. They know, they're doing it every day, so let's go and talk to them and find out and address those issues.
And one of the things, I suppose, hasn't been great has been the turnover of chief constables recently. You've just lost another chief constable. Where are we with the search for the new one, and what will the profile and I suppose pen pick of that person be?
Just let me say that the current Chief Constable, Andy Marsh, has done a terrific job in the way that he has led. He's a very empathetic, and he leads from the front, absolutely. And I've seen that, and I'm impressed with what he's done with the force over the time that he was Chief Constable. So where will I go for the next Chief Constable? I've said we're not going to do it in a hurry. I've already appointed an acting Chief Constable, who's the current Deputy Deputy Chief Constable in Sarah Crewe, and she will oversee the transition until we've appointed the new Chief Constable. And the Chief Constable must exude leadership quality, absolutely, and be somebody who has an unshakable belief in those original Peelian principles of policing. Now, the process has started, and a lot of it is controlled by the College of Policing and the process. And I'm just about to start ringing people to sit on the selection board, who will be a criteria of lots of different people from different elements that you would expect me to have on there. Hopefully by the end of the autumn, we will have found the right person.
All right.
But I'm not going to do it in a hurry. It's about the quality. And I've also said that I will take a rank down from the conventional selection grouping in order to make sure we have the biggest pool of people of quality who could become the next Chief Constable.
All right. Peel, remember, 200 years ago, it's a very different force now, isn't it? We've just seen one of the biggest clear-ups of organised crime in the last week, I think, in history, haven't we, across the globe, all done through technology. You know, Peelian standards maybe aren't going to help us with cybercrime or sexting or transphobia or any of those things. It's not just Bobby's on the beat anymore. That's not what's solving the problem. What do you think will be the defining moment for Mark Shelford as Police and Crime Commissioner, if you had to pick one thing that we'll look back on and say, yeah, that was your Peelian moment, that was your Shelford moment within this police force?
That I absolutely, truly represent the voice of the people of Avon and Somerset.
Okay. Final question. Favourite cop show over the years? What are we looking at here?
Heavens.
The Sweeney, the Bill, the Gentle Touch? What's your...
Probably Morse.
Probably more. Okay, I think that's that's a very
probably Morse because an intellectual cop and a detective and detectives are really crucial to making the whole process work.
Yes,
they're called investigators now, but they are the people that really think through these things, and I have huge respect for them.
All right, well, I think that's a great answer on many levels. Good luck with the job, Mark, and thanks so much for taking some time out. It's been great to meet you, and good luck.
Terrific, and it's a pleasure to have been with you.
Thank you.